Welcome to the Intelligent Risk interview for the December 2025 issue. My name is Carl Densma. I'm one of the co-editors, along with one of my guests today, Steve Lindo. If you are new to Intelligent Risk, we are a hub for unbiased knowledge for risk practitioners. We offer articles across a range of topics, from academics to practitioners as well. And we also have a great discussion group if you want to join on LinkedIn.
Oh,
I'll put the
really?
I'll put the link so that you can join that in the video description. But I want to quickly pass it over to my guests, the capstone authors for December 2025, and ask them the first question, and maybe introduce yourself a little bit before you answer as well. Jay, what prompted you to write the article?
Well, it's a continuation of the work Steve and I have done for almost 5 years now, and this was another one, and it's always about the data. It's always about the data and how we manage data and think about data data as analysts. It's the same driver that led to 2 books and multiple articles. It's a desire to translate what I did at the CIA, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, to Steve's world, which was a project. So a minute of context. For 30 years, I worked at the Central Intelligence Agency as an analyst, a manager of analysts, and a teacher of analysts. And as you might imagine from the movies, it was the world of high risk, high tension, high pressure. And every day, 24/7, we had to produce intelligence for the President of the United States and other senior officers. Every day. And it had to be good and had to be right and had to be on time. And it was a continuous stream of time-sensitive situations and demanding work. The work was always based on a codified set of standards and processes. We actually called it a tradecraft, analytic tradecraft. And it gave everybody in the building, everybody who was doing the work, a set of standards and procedures to get the work done, to make sure that every piece met those standards. It was consistently objective, data-driven, and met the requirements of the President of the United States every day. Every analyst who joined the CIA, regardless of the areas they worked on, took this training, every one of them, and from day one, and it continued throughout their career because the risks kept changing. The risks kept evolving, the environment kept evolving, and the techniques kept evolving in terms of the amount of data and how the data came in and how it was structured. And after retiring, I joined the private sector, and I quickly realized that they didn't have this kind of approach to their analysis, and they made a lot of bad decisions. But I couldn't figure out how to translate my world to their world until I met Steve. And on the back of a napkin, we figured this out. And we immediately saw that the worlds were overlapping. But again, how do we talk about it? How did he talk about my world and his world? And we were the first ones to meld the 2 worlds. We created intelligent analysis. And we demonstrate through these articles, which this is one, okay, the latest. We demonstrate its applicability across all these areas of expertise. And we've done a series of them. And we want to demonstrate that analysts can use this in whatever they do, however they do, and whatever they do it. And that's why I worked with Steve on the article. He talked me into helping him out again.
Thank you, Jay. And I really appreciate your historical perspective. So as Carl just mentioned, in my current role as co-editor of Intelligent Risk, I've drawn on, many years of my own experience in the private sector, in financial services and other industries. And what I can say, the common theme that drew me to see what Jay had to offer from his years of experience in government intelligence work was that over time, in addition to the day-to-day risk analysis, management and control efforts, the big lumps that came along were always something out of the ordinary. And because of the infrequency and because of the importance of these individual projects, there really wasn't a script. There wasn't a well-established, practiced, and tested way to be able to tackle something that had huge range of uncertain outcomes, impact on the organization, and needed to be decided on in a really short space of time. My mind is full of examples of what those could have been. And I'm sure that you have these own types of situations occur in your own daily work. In my case, it ranged from trying to put together long-term lending for a nuclear power plant with all of its decommissioning risks. It also had to do with dealing with some of the most dubious counterparties. You may remember, some of you, Enron. Enron was a big trading company, and the opportunities to make money trading with Enron were huge, but the risks associated with their questionable financial practices were really difficult to understand. And then on top of that, you've got global issues like cross-border risk. Countries like Brazil and Turkey, perennially very thirsty for risk appetite, but not necessarily very stable. And somewhere in between all of that, of course, along came the subprime mortgages and the banking sector meltdown. So I won't really rehearse all of those instances, but when I did meet with Jay, it seemed as if his experience in the government intelligence sector and the cumulative effect of those experiences, like the ones I mentioned, they just seem to be a perfect fit. So you can imagine, and I hope this will be true for you, once you get into the details and you understand the structure and the common sense and the logic, and as Jay explained, the foundation of data, what are the facts, what are the data, and what do they mean, it seemed like the approach was entirely suitable for the private sector. And the reason why I think our article, currently seems to be very topical is because right now the landscape across all dimensions for risk managers in industries is looking really shaky. You have huge questions coming from all directions. The advent of artificial intelligence, geopolitical risk bursting at the seams. We also have climate risk sort of looming in the background. So all of these major dimensions, these big lumps, so to speak, in the risk universe, they just seem to be perfectly suited for adoption of the kind of techniques that Jay practiced in his career.
Well, I know you're going to appeal to the intelligent risk audience, because last week when we recorded the our quarterly webinar, Intelligent Risk Presents, where we highlight authors that contributed to the previous issue in August, we had an audience question that asked, what skills do you think are going to be useful in a risk management career over the next few years?
Jeez.
One of them was AI, one was machine learning, all the tools that are very in vogue. And I threw in communication. And more than 50% of our audience agreed that communication is going to be the biggest skill that you need to master to be relevant in this sphere, which is, I think, what you guys are saying, that how you communicate ideas is very important. Aside from all the quantitative hard skills, you need to be able to communicate well. So I know it will appeal. I'm also interested what specifically will readers gain from reading your articles, and maybe again I'll turn to Jay first.
Okay, I've got some language here, but let me just say this. Given the audience and given their comment, they need to become intelligence officers. Okay. Steve and I are really careful not to question these guys' skills and intelligence and expertise. Okay, but given what the article says, they're just falling short in terms of how they do their work and how they see themselves and how they see their roles. Okay, and I think that their job remains the same. These are very smart, very talented people who are operating in an increasingly complex world, and their job is to take data and translate it into to intelligence that people can use to make decisions. Simple as that. But how are they doing that? Okay, and they can't do it the old way. That's our point. Okay, and what we offer is from an intelligence background is exactly the skills they need. Okay, they need to be problem solvers. They need to be flexible. They need to be collaborative. Okay, they need to be critical thinkers. Okay, and they need to be able to communicate all that stuff. Okay, to people who make decisions. Okay, and they need to do it in a way that's clearly crafted and written in one neat, tight lead paragraph. Okay, that's not in my script. Okay, but this has become increasingly difficult because of the complexity. And one of the points Steve was making is that they're living in the same world now. It looks like mine. This is not a banker's world anymore. This is a world that they're living in every day. The risks change every day. The threats change. And they need to be prepared to deal with them regardless of what comes at them, because that's their job. That's their job. And if they use the structured approach that we use, and again, it's pretty straightforward, okay? They're going to be able to produce intelligence more quickly, more collaboratively, more efficiently, with higher impact, okay? Um, it's the intelligence training that I took and that my colleagues took breaks down old habits. Steve and I had a phrase we use in our first book called rearranging neurons. Okay. Or changing the camera lens. Okay. They've got it all in their heads. The neurons are bouncing around. Okay. And what we do is we give those neurons some structure and a different approach, and the outcome is different. The other thing to keep in mind, and I'll close with this, okay? We oftentimes get pushback. Well, my boss won't let me do it, okay? No, 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 no. They don't need permission to do this, okay? They don't need permission. All they need to do is take a look at the article, read the book, and they're going to be better, and no one will know the difference, okay? They're just going to be better. And so what's the big takeaway? This is a different way of coming at themselves. This is a new way of approaching their work. They can do it, and they're going to be better for it.
Thanks, Jay. Well, I really have to echo what you say about how the approach needed to be able to deal with a constant stream of very uncertain and broad-ranging types of issues is not what's typically in a risk manager's playbook. And then part of that is because we've had a long period of relatively stable and benign activity. And, in all fairness, everyone has to tailor their work to the daily demands. So when situations that have, macro level begin to emerge and dominate the conversation and the trends. And then when you get the convergence of several of them all at once, then you mix in the promise, but the concerns and the very untested characteristics of artificial intelligence, which is just simply swarming over all domains of business, not just risk management, others. It really means that even a relatively routine decision can take on added dimensions which require a really careful and, as Jay said, a collaborative and a thoughtful and a structured approach to be able to understand what are the important characteristics. Because in the end, all of the work that both intelligence and risk analysts do has an audience that needs to make an important decision one way or another. And that decision might have short-dated or far-reaching long-dated consequences. But either way, the only way that those, the audience whose work all of our efforts justify can use the information is to get it delivered in a very, very concise and informative way, and to be able to see how that concise and informative recommendation, how it was derived. So in other words, one important element of the whole process, or it's really an analytical model that that we have packaged from the foundational work done by the intelligence services, is to show exactly which steps were taken, how they were taken, how they're based on the data, and what does the data say. And if the data says uncertainty, it's still possible to articulate how much confidence you have in the quality of the data, in its relevance to the key intelligence question that the audience needs to have answered, and what could be some steps they can take to be able to improve the probability that they'll achieve the outcome they're looking for. All of that information is clearly and logically catered for in the process that Jay performed throughout his career, and then through our work together, we've been able to package so that it can be used by yourselves. So, from our point of view, really, we'd like to hand the torch over to you. We'd like to say that the means to be able to upgrade your native and your inherited skills is there. The situation is calling for it, but in the end, it's the decision by yourselves to do something about it, to take advantage of these methods and make them work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I've had the pleasure of reading the article already, being a co-editor, so I really enjoyed it. And I would say one thing readers can look forward to is that you give excellent examples of exactly how this looks in practice, which which is great. It's something you can keep going back to as an analyst and saying, okay, am I following the steps laid out? Where did I go right? Where did I go wrong? You can keep coming back to it again and again. I think it's very powerful for organizing your thoughts and putting it in a structure, because let's face it, writing is difficult. without giving it some kind of framework to begin with. I think you offer a very useful guide there. Any final thoughts for our readers and audience today before we close out today's interview?
Well, I guess I'll start off. I think you make a very good point. The process is transformative. Okay, it's not a quick fix. It takes commitment, practice. Okay, and they have to do it every day. And the analysts at the CIA do it every day, all day, their entire careers. So you have to learn. It's learnable, but you have to practice it. But the results can be very powerful. I was an analyst at the CIA, and based on my analytic skills, I rose up in the ranks. And it's that ability to be trusted and to be understood clearly, and to bring important insights to the table, okay, is what moved me up. Okay? And one of the things that's been interesting is that as my colleagues retired, so they joined me in the world of retirement, we got sprinkled throughout the private sector, because we had this skill set. I joined a defense contracting firm, but one of my good friends became the head of intelligence at Disney. How do you like that? And she built a team that looked like us. She started out working on it by herself, and I talked to her a bunch of times and sent her a bunch of stuff, and she's built a team that looked like the CIA. And in terms of how they came at their problems and how they managed a very complex environment. So it's a way of thinking about themselves differently and a way of coming at their work differently that I would leave them with in my last 45 seconds.
Thank you, Jay. And I mentioned before how a lot of very major trends are all converging. So that could be seen as a problem, but it also could be seen as an opportunity because the acquisition of the skills by yourselves in your daily work and the use of those skills is what's going to distinguish you from other analysts. It's going to open a path towards a career that I'm sure you are capable of achieving, but this gives you the chance to be able to show that you're capable of dealing with large-scale, high-stakes type situations, analyze many different factors, give a very confident and fact-based analysis. So really the opportunity is there for you. These methods have been in existence for decades. They've been used productively and progressively enhanced and codified by the intelligence services. They're available for you. Your opportunity in the current environment seems definitely to call for them, and they promise potentially a successful career in whatever the future holds for all of us. But it's not likely that it's going to be less demanding than the present. So we encourage you take the reins when it comes to these skills, and as Jay said, change your habits and improve them with these skills and make them work for you in your careers.
Yeah, it's a bit like learning a language. Every day, practice, little by little, you get there. So, well, thank you very much. I think it's a very thoughtful capstone. Another link I'll include in the description is our directory where you can go and read Jay and Steve's previous capstone from about 2 years ago, and you can follow their train of thought as they're progressing with it. And we have plenty of other articles. My light is disappearing. There it is. We have plenty of other articles in the December issue to round out the year 2025. And like I said, come and join us over in the discussion group on LinkedIn so we can have more of these conversations and you can see more of how, one industry melds with another, and we have insights that you can take back to your daily job and also progress in your career, as Steve and Jay elaborated. So thank you very much. Enjoy the December issue, and we will see you in the new year. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Steve.